David Ames was the director of the Harlequin Group, a hotel and resorts development company. The Harlequin Group was a trusted brand, as it was endorsed by many celebrities and politicians. The Harlequin Group worked in Barbados, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. Ames had close relationships with the prime ministers of all those countries and persuaded them to endorse his development projects. Some of the other celebrity endorsers of the Harlequin Group included Wimbledon winner Pat Cash, former Chelsea star Andy Townsend, South African athlete Gary Player, and TV property legend Phil Spencer. Ames ran his business from a warehouse in Basildon, Essex. He owns a 5-bedroom detached home worth more than £2 million in rural England. Ames was a gifted salesman and a sweet talker. He met with investors and sold them on the idea of luxurious beachfront resorts, apartments, and condos. He saw Barbados, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines as up-and-coming vacation hotspots that had the potential to reap huge profits. He made brochures and ads, and even assembled a dedicated sales team to market his future construction projects to prospective clients. More than 8,000 people believed in Ames and the Harlequin Group, and they had no reason not to. Ames was backed by prime ministers, athletes, and celebrities. He was already wealthy, with a resume full of successful past construction projects. He also didn't ask his investors to pay much. In order to be guaranteed a condo or apartment unit, they only had to pay 30% of the unit's cost. The remaining 70% would be a mortgage. It was a good deal, so Ames sold more than 9,000 units. The potential value of Ames's buildings was projected to be nearly £1.5 billion. The return on investment for these units would be crazy high. Ames promised his investors a minimum of £20,000 profits per year from vacation rental income. When some investors raised concerns over the low 30% deposit on the units, Ames brushed it off and told people that he had extra financial backing for construction, that he would pay back over the years as his investors paid off their mortgage. It was clear to everyone that Ames had a vision. He believed the Harlequin Group was capable of becoming the next big resort development group. Investors believed in him too. After making sales to more than 8,000 unsuspecting investors, Ames made £6.2 million in shares and dividends for himself and his family. His plan was to use their deposits to build the resorts and holiday homes he imagined. But as it turned out, a 30% deposit for each unit wasn't nearly enough to pay for the construction. He effectively needed to sell 3 units in order to pay for the construction of 1 unit. He dug himself into a financial hole. Ames thought the only way out was to continue selling more units in order to pay for the ones he already sold. But as he continued on his sales ventures, he started selling units on properties he didn't own. By 2011, he stopped trying to build these vacation homes and instead started pocketing all of the profit. His investors became victims when Ames' poor financial planning resulted in a funding shortfall of nearly £1.2 billion by 2012, nearly 7 years after Ames launched the project. Even though he knew that his project would never materialize at this rate, he continued selling. He exposed his investors to a 100% risk of loss. Ames planned developments in 15 locations, but never broke ground in any of them. Instead, he only did work on a refurbished hotel in St. Lucia and the Buckingham Bay development in St. Vincent. Only 200 of the 9,000 units sold were ever built at Buckingham Bay, but he still sold units while knowing that the development was a complete sham. From 2006 to 2015, investors lost £400 million of their savings and pensions to Ames's big dreams and unending greed. Ames's promise of a 70% mortgage for his investors was never available. It was a lie used to entice investors who wanted the ability to pay off the majority of the cost over time rather than up front. But unfortunately, none of the investors did more research on their supposed mortgage provider, so they never found out that it didn't exist. One of his employees tried to purchase a unit at Buckingham Bay herself, but felt suspicious about the 70% mortgage Ames was offering. Another Harlequin Group employee, Michael Slade, who worked in procurement, went to visit one of the company's properties in St. Vincent, but found the entire site chaotic. The situation was nothing like Ames promised and sold in his many brochures and sales pitches. According to Slade, a surveyor's report of the site exposed the surprisingly low value of any of the progress Ames had supposedly made on construction. Slade chalked it up to a lot of waste, poor management, remedial issues, and poor construction. But when he asked to see the contract between contractors and developers that was supposed to outline the building to be constructed on that land, what he found was a simple 2-page document. It was a simple list of the types of buildings to be built without any dimensions, materials, or even dates. Ames was interviewed twice by investigators in 2013 and again in 2015. Both times he denied any wrongdoing and promised that he was making progress on the holiday homes. He maintained that he relied on advice from employed professionals and put the needs of his investors above his own. Instead of putting the money towards the resort rental units as promised, Ames's wife and son got a hefty paycheck of £10,000 per month. Only 15% of investors' money went towards construction. The remainder went to marketing materials, Ames's family, and his grand spending habits. He made generous paychecks for agents and advertising. He recruited several celebrity endorsers, including Wimbledon winner Pat Cash, former Chelsea star Andy Townsend, and TV property guru Phil Spencer. South African athlete Gary Player endorsed Ames's proposed golf course on the Marquee Estate in St. Lucia. In the promotional video, Player said he previously invested in one of the Harlequin Group's properties and was very happy with the results. None of these celebrity endorsers knew that Ames was running a fraudulent scheme from his warehouse in rural England. They truly believed that Ames was an adept businessman with money to spare and was able to pay for fancy marketing. One of the most ironic features of Ames's marketing tactics was the phrases, "a property you can trust." He plastered the saying all over his sales blurbs and had Spencer and Townsend recite it in all of their promotional materials for the company. Ames held celebrity-sponsored tennis, golf, and football academies with marketing videos. In the videos, Ames personally explained his lofty vision for his Caribbean resorts. He predicted major tourism opportunities and received praise from local politicians, including the prime ministers of Barbados, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. This made Ames's reputation even more valuable. Investors flocked to the Harlequin Group as they saw prime ministers and renowned celebrities believe in Ames's mission. Sarah Tricker, an accounts manager at the Harlequin Group, took several calls from investors asking when their units would be built. After several years, they weren't receiving any updates from Ames about the construction. At some point, it was beyond their control. Of course, there was no problem with the bank. It was a ploy Ames used to buy time for his scheme. The real problem was that there was no money to build any of the units because Ames was pocketing all of it. Then there were the phony business contracts with a simple list of proposed buildings without any costs or terms. When investors did a deep dive, they saw that Ames was selling units on properties he didn't own. Some investors lost their entire life savings in the process. England's Serious Fraud Office, SFO, got involved in an investigation that revealed Ames swindled £6.2 billion out of 8,000 people. The SFO revealed that Ames repeatedly ignored workings that the business was insolvent and on the brink of collapse. Meanwhile, he continued selling units to investors. Ames fired any employees who questioned his business practices or started to notice that something was wrong. He told colleagues that concerned investors needed to be put in their place in order to avoid bad press. The SFO found out that a great deal of investors' cash was spent on celebrity-sponsored publicity. Ames was charged with 2 counts of fraud by abuse of position. He denied the counts but was found guilty of both charges by a jury at Prospero House, Nightingale Court in August 2022. Prosecutors told the jury that Ames knew he was scamming investors out of millions and was using all the profits for personal gain. The lead prosecutor, Michael Bowes, said that Ames knew that his resort construction plan was a complete unworkable business model, yet continued to put investors at a 100% risk of loss anyway. He pointed to the 70% mortgage Ames offered, which wasn't financially feasible. Ames's wife, Carol Ann, supported her husband throughout the entirety of the 9-week trial. Both she and her husband declared bankruptcy at Southern County Court in December 2018, when 24 creditors made applications to the court. After his bankruptcy claims, Ames was barred from serving as the company director and was demoted to chairman. More than 25 witnesses were called to the stand to detail their interactions with Ames as contractors, investors, endorsers, or employees. Every one of them told of Ames's decade-long deception. The jury unanimously decided that Ames was guilty of both counts of fraud. When the jury announced their verdict, Ames hung his head in shame. Judge Christopher Heher predicted a long prison sentence to be handed down in September 2022. But the Ames family crimes didn't stop there. Back in 2014, his son Matthew Ames was jailed for 3 years and 4 months for executing a £1.6 million Ponzi scheme by setting up fake carbon credit and teak-free investment schemes. He promised investors an immediate 12% return on investment, which he knew wasn't achievable from the start. Matthew was a green finance industry executive who owned a company called Forestry for Life, supposedly dedicated to protecting the Amazon rainforest. Much like his father, who sought out celebrity endorsers to attract investors, Matthew hired James Middleton, the brother of the Duchess of Cambridge, to support his company. Middleton posed on behalf of Forestry for Life at a carbon trading expedition in London in October 2019, even though Ames was already under investigation by the Financial Services Authority. Matthew also hired England World Cup champion Jack Carlton and renowned athlete Sir Rodney Walker to endorse Forestry for Life. He created glossy brochures that included quotes from Prince Charles and Tony Blair to promote teak plantation projects in Sri Lanka and protection of the Amazon rainforest. The company said it would offer carbon credits to investors to be used to plant trees and offset their carbon footprint. But in reality, Forestry for Life didn't purchase any land in Sri Lanka or the Amazon. Matthew didn't plant a single tree. They were offering carbon credits for rainforest land it didn't own. The firm rarely gave investors proof of purchase. Instead, he spent his money on rented Lambos, first-class travel, and 5-star Caribbean villas. He spent investors' cash on meals at exclusive restaurants like Ivy in the West End and fancy hotel stays such as the Bellagio in Las Vegas, the Savoy, Hilton, and the Mandarin Oriental in Hong Kong. He invoiced his companies for a stay at the Upper House in Hong Kong and tickets to a Manchester United soccer game in Old Trafford. He boasted to investors about his plans to open offices in Dubai, Singapore, Dublin, and India. He stole £75,000 of retirement savings from one elderly investor who believed Matthew's claims that the teak market was rapidly outpacing the gold and oil industries. He set up a Ponzi scheme and paid old investors with the money from new investors. The company director was finally caught after he sold fake carbon credits to an undercover reporter in August 2010. Both of his companies, Forestry for Life and the Investor Club, were liquidated in March 2011 with debts of over £1.6 million. Matthew took the stand at the trial to claim that he wasn't able to plant the 5,000 saplings he pledged in Sri Lanka because he was having trouble securing the right land. He also claimed that all of his investors' money was put towards legitimate expenses. A jury of 6 men and 6 women in the Isleworth Crown Court found Matthew guilty of 2 counts of fraudulent trading by majority verdict. In March 2014, Judge Paul Dugdale sentenced him to 40 months imprisonment for swindling many members of the public, many of whom were elderly retirement savers. The judge noted that Matthew personally visited all of the investors who lost their money in the scheme to apologize, but that this should never have happened in the first place. The judge originally planned to sentence him to 5 years behind bars, but reduced it to 40 months for Matthew's ability to recognize his wrongdoing. Prosecutor Anthony Swift advocated for an even longer sentence, saying that the defendant was no stranger to white-collar crime after being banned from company dictatorship for 13 years, a punishment imposed on him in 2013. The defense also cited Matthew's lengthy list of personal problems, including a messy divorce that involved a custody battle over his 4 children. He also said that the defendant shouldn't be jailed so that he can continue working and making at least £10,000 per month to pay off his investors. Click to watch one of these next videos and let us know in the comments section whether or not you think scamming is in someone's DNA or is it something that's learned behavior.